Oh man, you should have been there. The pre-release and post-release of Balan Wonderworld was so entertaining, but also so sad. It's just so depressing to think about. It started with a trailer that announced a game by Yuji Naka, who inspired Sonic, Billy Hatcher, and Knights. The game looked really imaginative and cool. It looked a little rough, but it was still a while out, so I'm sure that they would be able to fix it up before the launch. That doesn't sound foreboding at all. Well, the more time has passed, the less excited everyone got. They released a trailer in a partner showcase which looked about as rough as the initial one, and I started to get worried. Then, there was a demo that was released in January, and the entire internet collectively asked, "Hey, what the hell is this?" The demo was a mess, and it being only 2 months out, we ended up really getting worried. Some people even gave up on it completely because of it. Then, jump to about a day before the game launches, and not only did they not send out review copies, which the last game to do that was the console version of Cyberpunk, so that's neat, but it was apparently found out that the final boss of the game required a legitimate seizure warning. But it was all fine because the Balan company had a trick up their sleeve. They were hyping up this day one patch that, in their own words, would reportedly fix every single problem with the demo. Did it do that? Well, if it did, then I sure as hell didn't see it. To put everything into context for all of the stuff that will be coming later, this game is actually not developed by Square Enix, but rather a smaller studio called Arzest, and they made generally all-time classics like Yoshi's New Island, Hey Pikmin, and the 10 FPS giant battles in that Mario and Luigi remake that killed the studio it was from. So, I want you all to keep that in mind when I say that yes, this game is absolutely abysmal. There is very little that is genuinely good about the game, and so much in here is wrong that it feels like a legitimate torturous experience. But there are a few things about this game that aren't completely awful. So why don't we get those out of the way before we get into the other however many minutes of this review. So, easily the biggest pro that I have for the game is the CG cutscenes and the music. The music is actually really good. It was made by the Kingdom Hearts 2 composer, so it feels pretty obvious that it would be great, but it's much better than I thought it was. Standouts for me would be the Chapter 4 theme, Balan's Bout, and the Chapter 5 boss theme, and the final boss theme is also really good. The cutscenes are also really high quality visually, especially the opening and ending ones. However, even these two aspects I can't really call great. The soundtrack may have some good stuff in here, but there is also quite a number of either bad or mediocre songs in there as well. They have these stupid gibberish songs from people start dancing for no reason, and most egregiously, it has the issue of songs that seem good, but get completely drove into the dirt with how many times you hear them. Most egregiously is the enemy battle theme. I ended up hearing this all the time in the game. How much? Well, my playthrough was 10 hours, and I've heard this song, no joke, almost 50 separate times. For the cutscenes, yeah, they look great visually, but the issue comes out when the animation quality feels like a mobile game ad that you would skip, or with the most confusing cutscene direction imaginable. We'll talk more about that when we talk about the game's plot. Alright, what else is good about the game? Some of the character designs are good. I like Balan, and Lance is also pretty decent. There is a single good piece of symbolism. I guess some of the costumes aren't terrible. That's really all I could think of. This game may not be as bad as something like Contra Rogue Corps or Fallout 76, but in many regards I like this game less because I could very easily imagine the amazing game this could have been instead of the garbage we actually ended up with. So, with these negative videos, I normally start off with the actual gameplay, and here, that is pretty much easily the worst part of the game. So, the general structure of this mess of a game is that for each world, there are 2 levels and a boss. You pick up costumes and collect Balan statues, which are basically Mario Odyssey moons, and then after that, you get a heart piece and complete the level. After that, you need to complete a certain amount in order to move on to the next set of worlds. In between each level, you go into this Chow Garden type area called the Isle of Tim Burtons, where you piss tears and force your children to eat it and then watch them fuck. Now, anyone see the problem with this structure? Easily the worst part about this basic outline is how confused this game's level structure is. It needs to design these stages around being straight course clear like 3D World, and a collectathon like Banjo-Kazooie at the same time. And with that, we run into an issue. The level design is garbage. More often than not, you will get really lost and you have no idea where to go or what to do, which would be fine in an open game, but not so much in a straight course clear one. And as an open collectathon game, the levels are not good either because of how linear they are and how they're forced to hide Balan statues either behind BS challenges or costumes that you can't even access in order to artificially pad out the game. The game's confusing level design makes it so it's a massive unedited hodgepodge of confusing, underdeveloped concepts and little to no genuine challenge that doesn't revolve around confusing or piss-poor design decisions. Let's put a tab in that real quick while we talk about easily the most important part of a platformer, the controls and movement. The controls in general feel very stiff and not really all that fun. The camera is absolutely zero fun to look at and control and can feel quite nauseous, sometimes lagging and stuttering the game if it moves too quickly, and the jumping does not feel well programmed at all. Now, Balan Wonderworld is actually fairly innovative in this genre. but it's innovative in the same way Tom Hooper was unique, where nobody has ever done it before, but that's because everyone knows it's an absolutely garbage idea. Now, please tell me, why would 𝘁rep𝗸𝗸 and the powers that be do this? For context, I played this game on PC, but the controls in the game are horse shit. Why? Because ZL, ZR, and all of the face buttons all function as an A button. In the menu, this is horrible because it basically means you don't have a back button, which makes navigating the menu a chore. And in the actual game, it means that you have 6 buttons that all do one thing: your costume's action. Without a costume, it gives you a jump that is just small enough to where you can't really reach where you need to with it, and it jitters the camera like it's playing fucking ping pong with the sides of the screen. But if you have a costume, it goes and completely replaces the jump with whatever effect the item has, whether it's an attack, or a jump, or whatever other weird stuff they make an ability. This comes with the obvious caveat that the most fun ones, like the pumpkin puncher or the mantis blades, literally remove your ability to jump in a platformer. Super Mario Bros. On the NES fixed this problem. This is not okay. And if that isn't the case, then some abilities have an attack and jump, but you can only attack if you're standing still. Some are literally just standard jumps. Some require you to just tap a button, while some require you to use more than just that button. Some are just flat out copy and pasted from other games, and even its own fucking self. And, most egregiously, stuff like the Box Fox or Lovely Lantern literally do stuff whenever they feel like it. These are some of the worst power-ups I have ever seen. These feel like the kinds of power-ups that would be introduced in a YouTube video where it'd be like, oh, the worst power-ups ever made. Where they would make up the most useless things ever, except here, it's actually real. Another major issue with these is how many of these are here only to make up for god-awful movement. Like, if you put Mario Sunshine Mario in this game, he could probably cross a majority of the obstacles in the game. You need a good base movement to have power-ups feel empowering, and Balan Wonderworld falls flat in that former so hard that it doesn't matter that there are 80 costumes. They wouldn't really feel like, oh, now I can do all this stuff and swim through water. It feels like, okay, now I'm able to do this thing, which puts me on even-ish grounds with other characters. It just all feels really subtractive, which isn't helped by the absolute lack of difficulty. I have played Kirby games harder than this. It's actually embarrassing. All of the enemies die in, at most, maybe 3 hits. Platforming is rarely ever challenging. When you die, you lose a costume, which means instead of being hard, it means it's tedious because you need to backtrack to another level to get the specific costume you need to get the thing you need to progress. And the puzzles really don't require thought, they just kind of require doing. There are very few, if any, puzzles that make use of a lot of costumes to finish, which would have been much more interesting. What if you needed to use the mantis blades to slice a ball, which you needed to push with the bulldozer into a catapult, which you would use hothead to light the fire to shoot? That would have been infinitely more interesting than 98% of what's in the game. Then again, you would have to watch a shitty transformation animation that is literally over 3 seconds, which kills the pacing, so I don't think that would have been executed as well anyway. The game is just absolutely mindless at points, and it gets really boring because of it. And the boss fights? They're a complete joke. So get this. So it's your standard 3-hit fare like in Mario, but with this, you can get trophies based on how many ways you hit him. Like maybe with one costume, or maybe you could hit with another. This sounds good, but the majority of them have one move dedicated to one specific costume. Which means you could attack with one, do the very specific second move with another, and then do the same thing you did the first time, but with the other. Boom! You have not only defeated the boss, but you have 3 trophies to boot like it's nothing. And this isn't some crackpot theory either. It's painfully alluded to as early as the first boss in the game. These bosses ain't shit. I'd mentioned the Isle of Tim's hub world where you enter the stages in, but there really isn't anything to talk about here. Unlike almost every other hub world, where there's something of worth, here are the levels and a scuffed chow garden. And when you realize that this is literally the only incentive to collecting the teardrop diamonds, you think that this is going to be useful in some way. So, what do you get by filling out the Tower of Tim's? I don't know. I haven't done it. I tried looking it up to see if anyone actually finished it, and apparently you get a Balan costume. Considering how the reward is only available in the game's non-existent post-game, and how grindy it is to reach that point, I wouldn't really say this is made up for everything done up to that point. And the hub itself just isn't that interesting. It's a flat, grassy plain with all of the hub worlds in the wrong order, for some reason. The post-game, I think, mainly just consists of collecting every single one of the 300 Balan statues, and while I haven't finished it, and probably won't, it seems like the most generic, tedious process ever. There are multiple repeats here, like shitty sports minigames that feel like they don't even work, extremely dated QuickTime events where you play as Balan shooting rocks for some reason, and sometimes they're just sitting there. I will admit though, that when I need a random costume that I don't have equipped, I get the vaguest amount of fun trying to beat the developers at their own game, and get them without the costume that is required, to varying results. That was the one instance I had of fun in the whole game. Trying to break it. That is quite telling. So yeah, everything around this platformer's platforming is so absolutely dreadful that it's honestly incredible. If this game released on the GameCube, then I would maybe understand it feeling so dated. But no, this is a current year full-priced retail release, when developers have released better games for less for the past 5 years. And I wish I could say that the gameplay is the worst part, but actually it is. But there are other aspects that are garbage too. For example, the game's presentation. Like I said in the beginning, the music and character designs are fine. They are perfectly fine things that are brought down by the everything else. The themes of these worlds are a mixed bag. Sometimes they're visually interesting, as is the case with Worlds 6 and 9, while others feel bland or copy-pasted. There are 4 separate grassy/forest worlds in this game out of the 12. And as I said before, the Isle of Thames is very bland and uninteresting. It just feels that way in many areas throughout the game. What doesn't help is how technically the game is a mess. And with this, I would like to bring up the Switch port. Oh god, the Switch port. Despite feeling the most natural fit between all of the platforms because of the 3D platformers on the console, the game was clearly not worked for Switch. It's like they dragged and dropped it with no effort to actually make it work. How do I know that? Well, looking at what you're seeing, that should be pretty obvious. The game looks so bad that it makes 3 houses look like Mario Odyssey in comparison, and the game runs indefensibly horribly. The game runs like garbage and even worse than a 2.5-month-old demo. It stutters like crazy when more than 3 characters are on screen, which really only happens with enemies because the NPC characters not only have sword and shield level pop-in, but it also has pop-out. If you get too close to an NPC, they phase out of existence and reappear if you're far enough, but not too far or else they'll disappear again. And what doesn't help is that the quality in the game overall with its animation is just terrible. The running animation looks hilariously awful. Whenever you finish a chapter, there is a nightmarish, horribly animated, motion captured 2006 dance scene for no reason. When you fall out of the world, you T-pose. Those weird bowing quick time events reuse the same 10 or so over and over again. And model collision through walls looks like what you see when you're 18 shots into a drinking game. And I couldn't talk about the visual things without bringing up the seizure lights. Yup, they're still there. Well, kind of. See, everyone was pointing to one specific part that they did indeed patch out, but whenever you hit the boss, it flashes white just as quickly, which is only slightly less able to give people seizures. What a nice upgrade. I guess it shows how Lance is probably the most powerful villain in media history, because he can kill the player of the game as well. And then, at the end, when they show the character designs for both good Lance and hatless Balan, they just look so weird. Why? Why is it like this? No, I'm not gonna say they whitewashed Balan. That's really stupid, but it still doesn't really fit. So yeah, this game looks like dick both creatively And technically, and it runs like dick and has numerous technical problems that don't even make sense in the context of game development. Sure, it has a good enough resolution on PC, but is that really enough to say that the game looks good? Now, I will be upfront here and say that this game does not need to have a great story. It would help, but it's not really necessary. There are platformers that do have good stories, like A Hat in Time, Crash 4, Sonic Adventure 2, and Psychonauts. Hell, even Mario Galaxy has a good story. So I want you to keep in mind when I say that even if you don't have a good story, you should probably still have enough context to make the adventure make sense. And if you're attempting to have a story, like Balan absolutely is trying to do, it should feel narratively cohesive and an interesting enough story to follow. I wanted to point all of this out now, before I say that the game's storytelling is absolutely backwards, confusing, and not well told in the slightest. So, this is the part where I spoil the story, but there's not much to spoil, and I don't even know if you care. But if you do, then you can go by now. So the story starts in two different ways based on which character you pick. If you pick the girl, then it opens up with a cutscene of all of the other girls in her orphanage, I think, and they're all whispering about her. What is any of this about? Not explained. The boy one makes even less sense. You start out with him busting a jiggy, then some people walk up to him, and they seem really friendly, and then he just walks away depressed for no reason. Now, with these two, I could easily come to assumptions about what they intended behind these, and say that the girls are whispering because she's dressed differently, and how the boy is here just because he's socially awkward. But the honest truth is that Yuji Naka and the writer for Yoshi's Island DS probably did not think that far ahead. After that, we both see them walk into a random show building in the back of an alley in the middle of their unknown city and meet Balan, who put them on a 10.5-hour LSD trip where they enter his Wonderworld and have to purify the hearts of the people within it were corrupted by the destructive and evil Lance. I see why Square Enix signed up for this now. Now, in terms of the main story, it is completely sidelined after this point for the next 12 worlds, where instead, the story is reliant on the 2 cutscenes per world about the character each world is about. These chapters will have Gilson B. Pontes tier names like The Girl Who Goes Gaga for Bugs and The Boy Who Becomes One with the Wind, generally have barely any story, the large duration of the chapter right until the boss. With each, you get an introductory cutscene that is both very well animated and very vague at the same time. With some, you can generally tell what might have happened, like Chapter 6 where the little girl's cat died, but there are others like Chapter 2 where apparently her dolphin friend randomly tried to kill her or something. It doesn't help with how short these are and how shittily they're animated, which both of these things add to the confusion of not knowing what the fuck is going on. And the ending cutscene can sometimes confuse things a bit more, like with Chapter 2 again, where the dolphin suddenly reverts to not evil mode. Again, I could make assumptions like that Lance possessed the dolphin, but again, I don't think they thought that far ahead. This process of no story, then cutscene, then boss, then cutscene is repeated 12, yes you heard me, 12 times. This in itself is fine, but nothing is really added to the main story throughout all this. And it would also be fine if these stories were even the least bit interesting and didn't make you want to go to sleep. But they aren't. So after those 12 worlds, you go into this cracked void where Lance reminds you of the vague cutscene at the beginning that you already forgot about. And they reminded you that there is, in fact, a reason you are here. You fight him, he turns into the dragon from Mario Odyssey, you get a seizure, you defeat his final phase, and then... Okay, I can explain this. Well, so it seems like Yuji Furukawa went under the Sonic Forces method of storytelling, where they put the villain's backstory in a book instead of putting it in the final game. Now, I obviously didn't buy it, just like how I didn't buy the game. The person who wrote the entries on the Villains Wiki did, and I'm really glad they did, so I could elaborate on this mindfuck of a scene. So, Lance was apparently the original Balan, but after 3,000 years, he became Lance after he became too obsessed with negative emotions. But before he truly became it, he made a new Balan and told him not to get attached or he will become a Lance as well. Now, this sounds cool, but the problem is that they didn't include any of it in the game. Now I can say that if you don't care about Lance's backstory, then it being shoved in your face wouldn't be good either, but this is the opposite respect, where they show so little of it. They just needed to put it in a log somewhere at the very least. And when you end the character like this, it's kind of necessary that you need to show anything relating to this backstory. As it stands now, it feels like a mix of laziness, where you didn't put this in, and mild greed, to where you would force your fans to pay for a separate book in order to make the story of Balan Wonderworld make any sense, which it still doesn't. But yeah, Lance turns back into pre-Balan, but then gets attacked by the evil guys again, and then falls into hell. If there was a comment I would make about this, I would make it, but I don't, so I won't. Then all of your characters you met across your journey have one final orgy before going back home. Balan takes off his hat and ew. The characters return to their home and their vague backstories randomly get a conclusion. So yeah, this story is both extremely uneventful, extremely bloated, and extremely confusing. I guess it's possible to be that way. Again, I don't expect for a platformer to have this massive artistic story. I'm not expecting gritty realism. I'm not expecting deep characters. I'm not expecting The Last of Us. I'm expecting something. And even compared to the low bar set for the genre that games from the past 10 years have jumped over, Balan Wonderworld still maintains to be so poorly written that it is honestly astounding. I think Balan Wonderworld is a bad video game. You probably might have gotten that part by now. But I've gotten a few comments saying that I only don't like it because it's not the Knights revival I wanted, and now I should judge it for what it is instead of what it isn't. Shut up. Just close your damn mouth, please. First off, this Knights footage you're seeing here is literally some of the first few minutes of Knights footage I've ever seen. Up until this point, I've only known the Knights character. And 2, I don't need to compare it to Knights in order to know that I don't like it. And honestly, I don't care if you like the game. I'm really glad you enjoyed it, and I honestly envy that. I wish I could have enjoyed it. But this game just feels so unpolished, confusing, dated, and poorly made in so many different respects that I hesitate to even say the game is okay. It's very obvious this game is rushed. You can't tell me that I look at this gameplay and these story beats and these mechanics and say that they did this all within the amount of time they intended. It is one of the least amounts of fun I've ever had with a video game, and it is easily both Yuji Naka and Naoto Oshima's weakest work by a mile, and Yuji was attached to Shadow the Hedgehog, for Christ's sake. This is a $30 GameCube game that was sold for $60 in 2021, and I just don't feel like I can call this good. What really doesn't help this game is that it was released a month after Bowser's Fury, the same day as Monster Hunter Rise, and in the same year that I first played A Hat in Time, Crash 4, and New Super Lucky's Tale. So, considering I've already played 4 3D platformers this year, I had obviously noticed the stark difference in the quality with this game. If you're looking for a good 3D platformer, then I highly advise to steer clear from it. I'd recommend you check out the demo if you were interested, but apparently it seems like Arzest caught on to the fact that the demo lowered sales, so they completely removed it. Considering the quality of the good stuff I mentioned and how there were some silver linings in this game at all, I, after much deliberation, bumped up my score to a 2 out of 10.
Okay, so this is a little addendum added months after the video's recording was finished, to show just how long this video took. The news that Yuji Naka has been fired from Square Enix happened in the middle of development. So, get fucked.
And when you consider that Square Enix said that this was Yuji Naka's one chance to make a 3D platformer, yeah, I don't know who to blame here. Because on one hand, I could say that Square Enix or Arzest rushed the game out, but to be fair, I think Balan was just creatively confused at its core. And while it would be very easy to see the game it could be, the honest truth is that the game wouldn't have been much better if it was delayed. It would still be a bad game that would have just completely ruined Yuji Naka's chance of not making RPGs. So yeah, I feel really bad for Yuji Naka, but at the same time, I'd argue that he brought it upon himself.